this is a study, again, that we tested. So what we did was to look at about 2,000 politicians in the United States who eventually ended up running a campaign. We looked at their history on social media. We went back for a period of 2009 and 2016. We went back in the history of the politicians to identify when exactly they opened a social media account, what did they do on social media, and how did that affect, if it did, how did that affect their support? Support is something that we can discuss and measure in many different ways. For a politician, support might mean votes, but it also might mean other things. For instance, in our case, we were focusing on the donations that politicians got, because even if you cannot get elected into an office, a donation is something that you can measure as a form of support. In fact, in the United States, when you look at politicians and their donations, you will see many small donations that people get, even if they can never get elected into an office. They'll get a $25 donation from a rural home in Pennsylvania, and you wonder, why exactly is this person giving $25 of donation? Because that's very unlikely to be pivotal. It's not going to change the outcome of an election, but it nevertheless symbolizes a support, a belief in the politician, and therefore it's important for us. So we chose to focus on political contributions after opening an account on social media. And frankly, when we were starting this research, I had the belief that social media should just simply be ineffective. It should not show any effect almost. And I was surprised to find that it does. When we looked at the politicians, what we have seen, this graph is a graph from our study, and what you are seeing here is a comparison of regions that you heavily use Twitter versus regions that use Twitter very little, and how the donations of the politicians, the average amount that we, of course, we are using a slightly different scale. It's not exact dollar amount, it's a normalized scale. How the donations of the politicians change over time. And you can clearly see that in regions where Twitter is more heavily used, and after joining Twitter, that's around week 0, politicians actually start seeing higher levels of support. This is controlling for many factors that could potentially compound the result. So in summary, what we found is that opening a Twitter account simply increased the support of the average politician. But something else that we have seen, also surprised us. It was the newer politicians, not the younger politicians, but people who were not experienced on politics, on Capitol Hill, who were getting a lot more support through opening accounts on Twitter compared to the more experienced politicians. So in summary, what we actually were able to identify from the study is that when you're opening accounts on social media, when you're trying to communicate with constituency, being new, having something new to say, and in fact, being able to update beliefs of people about you, what you stand for, who you are, is much more effective compared to having your name out there. So if you're a new brand, a new personality, you have a lot more to gain from being on social media compared to someone who's already known. And this finding actually has been expanded since we have shown it into also corporate world as well. So what else can we say? We didn't stop here. We, of course, looked into a variety of different outcomes. And we wanted to understand what makes these politicians who end up with lots of gains from being on Twitter, what are they doing right? What exactly is it that they are potentially doing to be able to gain more support? On Twitter or on social media, you could signal a number of characteristics about yourself, right? You could be demonstrating that you're more accountable, or that you have a much more niche offering, that you're very accessible, and you can increase awareness about yourself, and you could potentially set the agendas for discussion, and in fact, you might even engage in some degree of talk. For us, all the findings that we have, I've narrowed them down into 5 things. We can discuss them in detail.